The Washington Commanders have a golden opportunity to reclaim first place in the NFC East division and get a big road win against the Philadelphia Eagles. To do so, they're going to need to find a way to reestablish their power run game. That and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. You can also find me helping out the local coverage for WUSA9.com this season as well. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday. I appreciate you coming through today. If you're a first timer, special shout out to you for coming through. Hope you enjoy the program. Hope you stick around. If you're an everydayer, you know I appreciate you because I tell you that every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we're going to talk about why Quan Martin is my X factor for Week 11 against the Philadelphia Eagles, why I think the Washington Commanders can pull off a 3-point victory, and we're going to go over our 3 must-dos. Now, if you're thinking it's a little early to do the deep dive on the must-dos, you're right. Crossover Thursday coming up tomorrow, but of course, game day is on Thursday, so we can't wait till Friday to do a deep dive on these 3 things. So we're going to do that today, and we're going to do that thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. New customers, you place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. The Washington Commanders have to establish their ground game and not just run the ball. I'm talking about establishing the run game very differently than just saying run the ball. They've got to attack the left side of the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, and they've got to keep a lid on a very explosive Philadelphia Eagles offense. Those are the 3 things they must do, and we're starting all off with establishing the run game. Listen, not having Brian Robinson Jr. can no longer be an excuse for the Washington Commanders to forget how to run the football. Now, hopefully, we don't have official word right now, but hopefully Brian Robinson Jr. is back. And if Brian Robinson Jr. is back for this Thursday night game, then it's not easy button because he certainly may be back, but he certainly may not be 100%. So you may need to fold some other elements into the concept here. But having Brian Robinson Jr. on the field obviously brings that power element that the Washington Commanders have been missing. But the bottom line is no operation should be a single point failure. If you have any operation in any business, competitive or otherwise, and you have a part of that operation that has a single point of failure, you're going to fail eventually. That's just bottom line going to happen. And the 3 games that Brian Robinson Jr. has missed, we have seen this Washington Commanders run offense be impacted greatly, more than any one player should impact an operation. Look, I love B-Rob. Jane Daniels said it before. They love B-Rob. I think he's a great player, but this offense has to be able to function without Brian Robinson Jr. And look, while we're saying this, we also are coming off of a game where the Washington Commanders basically doubled up the Pittsburgh Steelers' previous points per game average. So let's not get too crazy to say that the offense itself just hasn't been working, but we all also have the eye test and we have the numbers and the data to point to and say, look, while the offense has still been able to put up points without Brian Robinson Jr., it has not been able to be as effective and take control of games as much as it had or has with Brian Robinson Jr., right? So there's a fine line to dance there. And when you look at these 3 running backs that the Washington Commanders are going to look to get that ground game going, if Brian Robinson Jr. can't play, or even if he's limited, you got Austin Eckler, who's going to be the starter, Jeremy McNichols behind him, and Chris Rodriguez Jr., who was signed to the active roster ahead of last week's game and now can be a part of that mix as well. 54% of Austin Eckler's carries so far this year have gone for 4 yards or more. That's pretty solid, right? Now they're about evenly split between A gap, B gap runs and C gap, D gap runs. So A gap is between the center and the guard, B gap between the guard and the tackle, C gap is off tackle, D gap is between the tackle and the split receiver or tight end split receiver. Basically your outside gap is basically the D gap there, right? So the A B gap runs that Austin Eckler has earned 4 yards or more on came against 4 different teams in 5 games. He was able to get 4-yard runs pretty consistently against the Buccaneers, against the Giants in both of those games, against the Bears, and against the Steelers. However, he has had a C or D gap run go for 4 yards or more in every single game he's played this season. Now, he didn't play against the Arizona Cardinals. Remember that. So that game just doesn't count at all. So a good amount of 4-yard gains between the A and B gaps, sure. And I think Austin Eckler has been running harder than a lot of people thought he would this season. But most of his A gap or most of his 4-yard runs are coming on the outside, off tackle or outside the tackles. Now, the Eagles are surrendering the 9th fewest yards through the A gap and the B gaps this season. They're averaging 3.6 yards allowed per carry. They're averaging 4.9 yards per carry off tackle or outside. So clearly, Austin Eckler's strength and this team's run strength when Austin Eckler is the ball carrier matches the weakest part of the Philadelphia Eagles run defense. So those two things kind of marry up, right? So it just makes sense that you're going to want to use Austin Eckler more outside than inside. Got to run him inside because you got to keep the defense honest. Don't get me wrong. You can't just say we're only going to run outside, but primarily he should be being used as an outside runner. Jeremy McNichols, meanwhile, has 16 carries for 4 or more yards this year. That's a 42% rate, so a little bit lower. Well, not a little bit, but quite a bit lower than Austin Eckler's. They came against the Cardinals. He had 1 4-yard run or more against the Baltimore Ravens. Got some against the Giants, got some against the Steelers. The Cardinals are the only defense he found consistent success through the A and B gaps against. You might all remember that game. Had a really good game coming in as Austin Eckler couldn't go. The rest have come off tackle or outside. And again, that Cardinals game, remember, it was Austin Eckler missing from the game, not Brian Robinson missing from the game. So you have that Brian Robinson power presence, hit those body blows to the defense. It tires them out. It gets them a little bit wounded. Jeremy McNichols comes in and takes advantage of it. So if you don't have Eckler and you don't have, or if you have Eckler and McNichols, but if you don't have Brian Robinson, or if Brian Robinson is limited, able to play, but maybe not able to do a full workload, how do you establish that power run game? Well, everydayers, you're going to hear me say this again because you've already heard me say it. Chris Rodriguez Jr., 62% of Chris Rodriguez Jr.'s carries have gone for 4 yards or more. That is significantly more than Austin Eckler's, way more, about 20% more than Jeremy McNichols. So now he's only had 13 carries this year. So 8 of those carries have gone 4 yards more. Very small sample size. So that number, right, can be a little bit skewed. However, it's the only sample size we got. So I can only work with the numbers that we have to look at this stuff, right? 7 of those runs, 7 of those 13 carries that went for 4 yards or more, 7 of the 8 that went for 4 yards or more have come between the tackles. So in the A gaps or in the B gaps. He does have 1 outside the tackles because I think Chris Rodriguez has a little bit more versatility than people give him credit for. So if Brian Robinson Jr. can't go, or if he's limited, Chris Rodriguez Jr. needs to get involved earlier in the game. He got touches midway through the third quarter against the New York Giants. He didn't get his first carry against Pittsburgh Steelers until midway through the third quarter as well. The only difference is there against the Giants, he ends up with 11 total carries. Against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he ends up with 2. He actually ended up having 3, but one of them, a 6-yard gain on a third down, or 6-yard gain, rather. I don't know if it was on third down, but he had a 6-yard gain that was called back on a holding penalty. Now, look, I'm not saying that Chris Rodriguez should be the primary ball carrier the way that Brian Robinson is when he's in there. But what I'm saying is you actually have to establish the power run game. You can't just hand the ball off to Austin Eckler, Jeremy McNichols, who simply are not as effective between the tackles, aren't as effective in delivering those body blows to this Eagles defense and say, okay, we tried to run the game. Now let's just go throw the ball 30 to 40 times. That is not how you try and work to establish a power run game. And look, these offensive linemen are never going to come out and say, yeah, we'd much rather block for Brian Robinson than Austin Eckler. But there is a little bit of a subconscious, like the reason offensive linemen love run blocking is because it's much more aggressive. The reason they love run blocking for a guy like Brian Robinson over a guy like Austin Eckler is because they know that Brian Robinson's going to bring the thump. They know that Brian Robinson's going to hit that gap they open up, and he's going to punish whoever's between that gap. It becomes a little bit more physical subconsciously or even consciously, to be quite honest with you. Chris Rodriguez brings that thump. He brings that aggressiveness in between those tackles. You have to go out there and establish the ground game. The Eagles' run defense is actually stronger up the middle, but it has to be respectable. You have to keep the Eagles honest, protecting that run game. There has to be that threat, and Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols just haven't been that so far. Fully would expect Cliff Kingsbury to come out, try to get Austin Eckler, try to get Jeremy McNichols going through between the tackles. But if it doesn't work, and if it doesn't work early, right? Like Chris Rodriguez went out there, got 2 carries, got a third carry, it got called back on a penalty. It really didn't work all that well. Basically all but abandoned. Chris, look, have the same quick, not hook, but trigger to put him in there. If Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols aren't getting good gains, 4-yard gains on a regular basis in between the tackles, give Chris an opportunity and let him get going, man. Don't give him just 2 carries and put him back on the bench. It's about finding that run game consistency. It's not about the averages. So Austin Eckler and Jeremy McNichols, their averages between the tackles actually higher than Brian Robinson Jr.'s, but it's because they're getting little hits here and there, but then they're getting 1 or 2 big ones here and there, and that kind of skews the average. But you need consistent down-to-down production to stay ahead of the chains, to keep the Philadelphia Eagles defense in unpredictable situations where they can't just pin their ears back or they can't just stack the box. You need to keep this Eagles defense guessing all night long. The best way to do that is to establish that power run game and give Jaden Daniels that platform to play off of the way that he has in his most successful games this season. That's just the first item that the Washington Commanders must do in order to beat the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday night. Coming up, we're going to talk about how they attack this Philadelphia Eagles offensive line and how you make sure that Jalen Hurts' hot last month of the NFL season gets cooled off just a little bit on Thursday night. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And that's coming to you thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by FanDuel. And with FanDuel, you can get ready to tackle all the NFL action this weekend with America's #1 sportsbook. And right now, if you're a new customer to FanDuel, you can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your pregame and your live in-game bets on the NFL, and you can do it all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you just sense the game flow going one way or another, you can go to FanDuel, check out the live stats, view the play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you can then place your bets. The Washington Commanders are 3.5-point underdogs against Philadelphia Eagles this Thursday night as we speak today. So if you have a hunch on that, or if you're watching the game and have a hunch during the game, just go to FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Today's episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks. And with Prize Picks, you can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. So on Prize Picks, you're going to pick 2 to 6 players, kind of create your card there. You're going to predict whether or not they're going to have more than or less than their projected stat line. And for every player you get correct, you win real money. And again, with Prize Picks, as little as 4 correct picks could win you up to 100 times your money. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. So sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even have to win that card to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed, win or lose. So if you think these players are going to get more than their projected stat projection, less than their stat projection, whatever it is, cook up your hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup with Prize Picks. Run your game. The Washington Commanders, in order to get a win against Philadelphia Eagles this Thursday night, have got to attack the Philadelphia Eagles left side of their offensive line. That's coming up next on our 3 must-do deep dive of Locked On episode of Locked On Commanders. If you want to get more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, think about becoming a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. And once you sign up, you'll be able to text me your comments, your questions, your takes, your thoughts, and I'll be able to text you all of mine. I'll be able to text you links to content, bonus content, live text messages from events, and also insider-only Zoom conference invites. Those are always a lot of fun. We're going to try to do one on Thursday ahead of the game from the link from inside the stadium. So if you want to come through for that and get everything that's going on there, again, join subtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. First 2 weeks are free. So give it a try. If you like it, stick around. If you don't, as always, appreciate you for giving it a shot. The next must do that the Washington Commanders must do in order to defeat the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday night, attack the left side of the offensive line. Now, it does look like left tackle Jordan Mailata is going to be returning for this game. His window, he was on IR with a hamstring injury, has missed the last 4 games for the Philadelphia Eagles. All 4 of those have been wins for the Eagles, so that's good for them. But he was on IR. His window to return was opened up on Monday following their game Sunday evening, and he's been a full participant in practice both Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, Tuesday, again, was a projection, but Wednesday, he was a full participant in practice. Now, the important thing to understand here with these full participant labels is also practices during these short weeks are not as extensive, right? So they're not necessarily stressing that hamstring out as much. It's just like Brian Robinson Jr.'s hamstring. Like Brian Robinson Jr. practiced in a limited fashion on Tuesday, but Wednesday is the real test. And of course, Thursday pregame is the real test. But even if Jordan Mailata is able to go the key is for this Washington Commanders defense is going to be to probe and test that left side of the offensive line, because while Jordan Mailata has been out, left tackle Fred Johnson has had to come in. He's given up the second most pressures of all offensive linemen this season with 32 of them. Those 32 pressures have resulted in 7 sacks, because Jalen Hurts' pressure to sack rate is actually pretty high when compared to the rest of the National Football League. Now, left guard Landon Dickerson, who's certainly one of the better offensive linemen in the National Football League, is allowing the second most pressures, 27th overall, and those 21 pressures have led to 3 sacks. And you kind of look at it and say Landon Dickerson probably trying to make up a little bit for what's happening at left tackle. Basically you weaken one of those positions, you weaken the entire side. Jordan Mailata, even if comes back, it's his first game back. It's been a short week. Granted, he didn't play Sunday, but you got to stress him. You got to test him. You got to run games at him. You got to make him move. You got to make him test that hamstring out early. And you got to lean on guys like Dante Fowler Jr., who have been on a tear. Dante Fowler Jr. on pace to have a career season. He's got more sacks this season already than he has since I think it was 2019 was the last time he had this many sacks with the Los Angeles Rams. And I think he and Cleveland Farrell are going to kind of be that key to kind of, that duo kind of attacking that left tackle position. Again, even if it's Mailata stressing it because it's the return, if it's Fred Johnson, he's got kind of a proven track record of giving up pressures. But he can't just run crazy, right? Jalen Hurts certainly has that mobility, and he's been using it a lot more lately than he was earlier in the season. And because of all of the things that Jalen Hurts has been doing, I wrote about it for CommanderGameDay.com on SI. He's had really quite the last month or so. He's leading the league in quarterback rushing touchdowns. His passing numbers are really climbing, and that's the third must do. You got to keep a lid on this Philadelphia Eagles offense. And I know that a lot of fans are going to say, great, you got to keep a lid on this Eagles offense. And we just watched the Commanders lose a game where they gave up a deep pass to Mike Williams on a fade where Benjamin St-Juste didn't keep the receiver in front of him, didn't keep the lid right on the secondary or on the pass play. You got to rely on this team to have learned that lesson. And I'll tell you right now, we talked to Ben, we talked to Quan Martin, we talked to Percy Butler, and to a man, all of them talked about keeping a lid on this Philadelphia Eagles offense, not allowing these explosive passes to come to fruition. Now, Jalen Hurts right now is the 3rd highest completion percentage in the NFL, the 4th highest yards per attempt percentage, but he also has the highest time to throw percentage, time to throw average, 3.16 seconds he's holding the ball. So not only is Jalen Hurts looking for these deep passes, he's willing to stand behind his offensive line a little bit to find them, which might explain some of the pressure numbers as well. His big time throw percentage is 3rd in the NFL, but his turnover worthy percentage is also 3rd in the NFL. So again, as long as this Washington Commanders defense plays smart, they're going to have opportunities for a takeaway or two. They need to capitalize on those opportunities. The average depth of target for Jalen Hurts this season is 5th highest in the NFL. So again, everything basically points to Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles offense trying to take big shots. Bottom line up front, Jalen Hurts likes to take deep shots. He likes to wait for them, but he will run. He's 5th in the quarterback scrambles this season. And again, like I said, leading the NFL in quarterback rush touchdowns over the last month. He will throw across his body. So zone discipline is also going to be key against Philadelphia Eagles offense. You can't just say, well, Jalen's rolling to the left and that basically eliminates my side of the field. No, you've got to be disciplined, stay in your assignment. Completion percentage drops to 64% against the blitz, which is 13th among NFL quarterbacks. So still not bad, but certainly lower than without blitzing him. Yards per average drops about a yard. Big time throws still good, but not as good. So again, blitzing certainly is effective against Jalen Hurts, is effective against most quarterbacks, right? No quarterbacks like pressure, but at the same time, Jalen Hurts was pressured on over 50% of his snaps against the Dallas Cowboys and still completed 7 of 9 of his passes, and 2 of those 7 passes went for touchdowns. Now, if you watch that game, Dallas Cowboys defense has a lot to do with those numbers as well and their inadequacy back there, but the Washington Commanders have to make sure they're not presenting that same type of front. So there's been a good amount of explosives for the Philadelphia Eagles offense, but really when you look at it, it's really been about more the Philadelphia Eagles taking advantage of missed assignments by the defense, more so than them just imposing their will on opposing defenses. So if you play sound football, you certainly have an opportunity to beat them. And if you need evidence of that, you just look at the explosive numbers, right? In every Eagles win, they've averaged 8.3 explosive plays per game. And the only win they have a game in where they don't have at least 3 explosive passes against the New York Giants. They only have 1 explosive pass against the New York Giants. However, they also had 6 explosive runs against the New York Giants, and they have 3 explosive runs in every single win this season or more. You look at their 2 losses, the Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the Falcons, they did get 4 explosive runs, but they got 0 explosive passes. Against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, only 1 explosive run and 2 explosive passes. So their averages in their losses are 3.5 explosives per game, while their averages in their wins, 8.3 explosives per game. That is a significant difference in explosive play. And clearly, the defenses that are containing the Eagles offense, giving their teams a better chance to win. So that is our final must-do of Week 11 as we get ready to watch the Commanders take on the Philadelphia Eagles on Thursday Night Football. Coming up, my prediction, my X factor, why Quan Martin is going to be key to the Washington Commanders getting a victory. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you by Ultimate GM. Commanders fans, you might remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM. Well, they're back this season, and they've added an amazing new game mode that we got to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM, get your Adam Peters on, now has a head coach career mode. So on top of getting to build your dynasty, you can now also call the offensive plays during the game as well. So not so much getting your Dan Quinn on, but you can get a little bit of your Cliff Kingsbury on. Additionally, you're going to dig the new tools you can work with, such as individual training camps and upgrading negotiation systems. The fun and realistic game has just gotten a lot better. If you've already got it installed, all you got to do is update it. If you haven't installed it, just install it. Ultimate Pro Football GM. It's completely free. It's got no ads, and it's 100% playable offline. And here's a special offer for Locked On listeners. Use the promo code Locked On NFL, all caps, all one word, inside the game store, and you'll get a free boost to your franchise. Make sure you get it. This perk is going to jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you're going to need in creating your dynasty. To download the game, just go to ultimate-gm.com or look it up in your favorite app store. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, and it is a Wednesday pregame episode because we've got Thursday Night Football. Washington Commanders facing the Philadelphia Eagles. Literally, I'm recording this episode. I'm going to publish this episode. I'm going to go to Ashburn for practice, press conference with Dan Quinn. I'm going to drive home. I'm going to pack the car, and my wife and I are going to head to Philadelphia, and then we're going to record another episode tonight to drop for you either late Wednesday night or early Thursday morning. And then we've got the game, and then it's just on and on and on in the NFL schedule. You got to love it. X Factor prediction time. My non-quarterback X Factor, because quarterbacks are always X Factors. Safety Quan Martin. And you just go back to the numbers we just talked about, right? Limiting the explosives for this Philadelphia Eagles offense is absolutely going to be key. Talked to Quan Martin in the locker room on Tuesday after practice, and that was one of the first things he acknowledged. When he was asked by Donna Hopkins of Pro Football Talk, hey, Quan, what do you see in this Philadelphia Eagles offense? Quan, right off the bat, said we have to limit the explosives. So believe me, it's something that I see. It's something that you see if you watch the Philadelphia Eagles play. It's something that the numbers project, and it's something that the tape also supports. You have to contain the explosive passes. Safety Quan Martin is going to be my X factor of the game. Now, clearly, the secondary as a whole is going to be important on this, and you can't just look at Quan Martin and say, well, you got to keep the lid on everybody, because that's just not physically possible. So if you know you don't have that deep safety help, you got to play smart, understanding you don't have that deep safety help. But when that deep safety help is there, Quan has got to be on point, and he's been on point for the most part all season long. Inside or non-quarterback X factor, we had a few votes here. Benjamin St-Juste got 2 votes. Brian Robinson Jr. comes away with the most with 3 votes. So again, if he's active, certainly going to be that X factor. You come back to that first bullet we talked to in the beginning of the episode, establishing that power ground game for this offense. Obviously, if Brian Robinson is in there, how effective he can be will be big for this game. Defensive coordinator Joe Witt Jr. getting a vote in this win, coordinating that run stop of defense against Saquon Barkley, coordinating that pass rush up front, but then also making sure his secondary is ready to keep a lid on this defense. So certainly valid there. Luke McCaffrey got a little bit of love in the votes. Cornerbacks just in general, the secondary in general. Johnny Newton, we had a couple insiders mention Johnny Newton, one specifically saying they want to see Johnny Newton make up for that mistake he made last week against the Steelers in a big way, maybe even get another takeaway on his docket for the season. Insider prediction goes to the Philadelphia Eagles' way. Now the averages come out. It was nearly split. One more insider voted that the Eagles predicted the Eagles are going to win over the Washington Commanders. The overall score differential, however, Philadelphia Eagles 28, Washington 27. That's when we averaged out all the score predictions, and relatively split down the middle. So one thing that I really enjoy about the insiders, they're all Commanders fans, but they also all keep it real with me in those text messages. So we do have an insider prediction that the Eagles will come away victorious. My prediction this week, so far on the year, I've got the same exact record the Commanders do, 7-3 on the year straight up, picking the team that wins, 7-3 against the spread. The Washington Commanders are 3.5-point underdogs in this game. At the time of this recording, the over-under on the game is 48.5 points scored, and I am predicting a 27-24 Washington Commanders victory. I have faith that this secondary has learned its collective lesson, right? I've got faith in Quan Martin, and I think that this defense knows how to rush smart against Jalen Hurts without giving him massive lanes to run through. I think the middle part of this defense knows how to cover their zones and cover their assignments without giving Jalen Hurts massive lanes to run through. That run defense still a little bit suspect, but has been good enough anyway to keep teams from taking over on the ground completely. So I am going to lean my pick towards the Washington Commanders. Of course, if they win by 3, they cover the spread. Total points scored 51, so we're looking at an over on that 48.5 points. The next time we speak, we will have Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles with us to talk about this crossover Thursday episode featuring the Washington Commanders and Philadelphia Eagles matchup. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you got to do is text me directly by becoming a Locked On Commanders insider at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL. In the morning, it's Madman Tyler Rowland kicking you off with a double shot of NFL espresso. In the afternoon, you get the barbershop vibe with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. And since it's Wednesday, I will be there with Tony this afternoon. It's the all new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Every day is a special thank you to you for coming through. First timers, hope you enjoyed this first ride with me. Hope you come back for more. Either way, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.